Okay, GVRD open. We're going to add, if you don't mind, to the resolution to close K for negotiations regarding services. With that, would someone like to move the agenda? Moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Minutes from July 29th. Moved and seconded. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. All those in favor, opposed, carried. We have a pretty healthy consent agenda in front of us. So I'm going to pull 2.1. We just need to add a couple. The 2.1 is the agricultural production. We just wanted to add a couple regional districts to send the information to. 2.2. Or sorry, 2.2. Sorry. Would anybody, Director Jordan?
Yes. Gas, 3.1.
3.1, yeah. All right, anyone else would like to pull anything? Seeing none, would someone like to move the remainder of the consent agenda? Moved and seconded, last chance. All those in favor? Opposed, carried. So 2.1, we would like to, and this was discussed at committee, it just wasn't captured in the motion, but, sorry, 2.2. Thanks for the correction. 2.2, we'd like to add, Central Okanagan Regional District and Agricultural Land Commission to B. So we let everybody know, but we specifically let those groups know, and that was a discussion at the Regional Planning Committee. It just didn't find its way into the resolution. So with that, would someone like to move that motion? Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments on that? Director Jackson?
Thank you, Chair. I certainly support the thrust of the report and the recommendations. We in Delta, just to make people aware, we supported this for quite a period of time in our community, and our official community plan even states that our policy around this issue, that recognizing farming as the primary use of agricultural land, and also supporting initiatives to reinforce farm use for agricultural land and the continued development of a viable agricultural industry. So we have had major concerns over the past many years about rural residential, and there's also a market for the storage of trucks, equipment, recreational vehicles, and so on. And so I really agree with the position that's being taken and exploring these mechanisms to address the farmland speculation and deter the non-agricultural development of farmland. We've been very lucky, and we worked very hard to keep this in line in our community. But one thing I'm not sure that was addressed that I could see, at least in the report, was the question of greenhouses. And as you know, greenhouses are very lucrative, and we call them industrial agriculture, but they fall under the the very lowest of taxation, mainly because that's where our assessed and our taxation is for all of farming. We can't, and we've asked if we could have those split out, but we've been always told that we couldn't. I don't want to necessarily be punitive towards the greenhouse industry, but they certainly are on a very different footing than the regular agricultural land-based farmer. So I perhaps would like to have that considered as maybe an adjunct to this, and hopefully there may be someone that would like to have an opinion on that issue and see if there's something that can be done. If we're looking at two tiers, maybe there's something else that we can do relative to the greenhouse industry as well. So I wanted just to bring that to your attention, and hopefully I can leave that with staff and they can have a look at that and perhaps include that at some point going forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I see Elise back there, our head of policy planning, nodding her head as well. So
thank you very much.
It's been noted.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up. I have no other speakers, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 3.1, 2016 TransLink application for federal gas tax funding from the Greater Vancouver Regional Fund. Director Jordan, did you want to move it, or should I get someone else to move it first? And someone like to move it? Moved and seconded. Oops, that's not Jordan. Director Jordan, over to you.
Thank you. I've got some really technical questions, and I may not want to bore everybody with those ones, right? But the big thing that I'm concerned about is in all of the projects that are listed today, in each one, there is a category listed under the eligible items for the cost of. For example, I think it's Project 9, conventional buses, 63 million for the buses, 600,000 for onboard equipment, and 133,000 for debt financing charges. So that's my question, is why are all of these categories accumulating debt servicing charges when the money's in the bank? The money's either at UBCM or in TransLink's own bank account, and they're accumulating interest at both places, and yet we're having a cost of debt servicing charges against the use of the funds, which is something that I've never seen added on in the past. So for these 9 projects, there's $500,000 worth of debt servicing charges being allocated to the cost of the project, and that doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay. Do some of our friends from TransLink want to tackle that? Because I'm not sure if we have that answer.
Tim Shaver from TransLink Finance. With all of our projects, we use charge interest on construction for financing. However, with the gas tax projects, we do net against the contributions. So whatever we charge for interest during construction is net of contributions.
Was this the practice previously under the old agreements? I don't ever remember seeing that before.
Under the old agreement, interest during construction was not eligible cost. Under the new agreement, it is an eligible cost.
Can I be provided with a copy of the new agreement? I'd like to see what other things are different compared to before, because it just doesn't make any sense to me when the money is advanced in the front end, why we would be being charged $500,000 against that cash for the cost of debt servicing when there is no debt servicing.
Again, the charge is only on the net difference, so the part that's not eligible that we charge the interest on construction. The money that's already funded by the.
So we can seek some more information, and we can get you the agreements for sure, because they're public information, but we can maybe get some more details of what this actually looks like in real practice instead of just kind of a high-level statement, like a one-page overview or something like that. I don't have the answer. I don't think our staff have the answer, but we can work with TransLink to bring that forward for sure.
Okay, and just the other question is with the. It's been a long time since this has come forward to us, and there's also a piece about where the other projects in progress were supposed to have been reported out annually to us, and the state of the projects and all of that sort of stuff. Are we going to start getting those now as well, or? Because I see a list of, in this.
But we will get it going. So we will, right, this is the first time under the new agreement that we're approving it. So these projects that are in front of us, we will start to get those follow-up reports that was built into the, so we set up, if you recall, everybody recalls, we set up a task force here at Metro Vancouver to review or to develop a new process to bring forward gas tax applications to this board. Part of that process is also the follow-up that you're referring to. So since this is the first set, we will see follow-ups to progress to how they're procuring and how they're spending this money going forward.
And will we continue to get reports from the previous projects that are not complete yet? Because some of those were going into, 2018, et cetera.
So we have those, we can get those to you because we needed to, part of it was understanding, even though we have a new agreement, the unfunded, or the money that wasn't spent under the previous agreement now falls under the new rules, right? As some of these are outlined there. So we have a breakdown of the unfunded, or the money that wasn't spent from previous years, so we can get that to you as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Director Jackson.
Thank you. Just a couple of
Oh,
questions.
sorry, one sec. There you go.
Pardon me, just a couple of questions, Chair. In 2016, how much did we actually receive from the federal government for this region? I'm not talking about all British Columbia, but for the region. I didn't see that anywhere, and I'd like to know what the per capita is then. Well, how do they calculate that per capita?
You're really racking Carol's brain here.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
there is, it's about $125 million per year, and there's an escalation amount on that over the 10-year agreement. So that's, it's broken up into the TransLink funding, which is the regional fund, and then the Community Works funds. And so the Community Works fund, boy, I can't remember the annual amount. What every community gets a base amount, the 50,000, and then the incremental amount is distributed on a per capita basis by population. So I can certainly get that information for you. It's all UBCM actually holds the money and then distributes the money from the federal government through the UBCM to the municipalities. So
Yes.
we can get that for you.
Okay, 125 million is a lot, and of course, this board has voted to contribute their municipal city monies to the TransLink pot, if you would, and I was just wondering, what the per capita amount would be from federal government to this region.
Yeah, we can certainly get it, and I know that of the overall amount that we get, 95% goes to TransLink, and 5% is the divvied up amount under the Community Works Fund. So we'll get that information and share it with the directors.
I think that would be good, and if we could also in the memo or a report or just a pink memo or whatever, just following up on the previous speaker. Let us know what the changes were in the new agreement. I've forgotten, and you really have to wade through so much paper to find out where it is. And I guess I didn't remember, at least, that we had changed the agreement. And it would be interesting to analyze that to see what those changes all were, what they all were. It would, I think, if we could have that so that the board members would be aware. Not everybody has the history of being here and going through those difficult times when we had to move these funds around. So I would appreciate that. If we could just get a memo, Chair, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank
Absolutely. There are no other speakers, so, sorry, you're right, Director Harris, I did have you, and I accidentally bumped you out.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I had a couple of questions, and a request and a question. One is, in future, when we get these reports from staff and from TransLink, I would appreciate seeing life cycle costs and emission reductions. We had a similar analysis and a long discussion of that kind of a thing in the one associated with the fleet, our fleet here, our car fleet, item 1.1. We had that discussion at committee. When we move toward low emission vehicles, I think it's a super good idea. I support it, but I'd like to see the life cycle costs and emission reductions, and an idea of sort of the implied value on carbon reduction that we're putting in. So if that could be in future reports, I'd appreciate it. That would be one point.
Okay.
And the second is really just a question. I don't understand, going back to Director Jordan's point, when we're talking about vehicle purchases, where's the interest during construction? I don't get why there would be any.
Tim or Jesse or someone?
Thank you.
Perhaps I wasn't clear enough the first time. The interest on construction is on the portion of the cost that TransLink pays. So the funding from gas tax pays 100% of eligible costs, but there is about 5 to 10% of the cost that is not eligible.
Okay, thank you. I need more background on that. I can't respond, but
So
thank you.
what we'll do is we'll like I said, we'll get an overview of what the technical answer is, and then we'll maybe give you an example, or we'll give the board an example, when you choose whichever project.
Mm-hmm.
95%, $4.6 million is this, but there's an extra part that's not covered, and we'll highlight which part's not covered and why by the agreement, and how TransLink plans to fund that portion in a real example.
That really would be helpful because it doesn't, so we don't have a closed circle here, knowing we're buying vehicles and still have an interest charge that's related to construction. It's really hard to see where that is.
Sure.
Thank you.
I don't know the answers to all of this.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to illustrate how we'll try to get those answers for everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Director Walton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going back to the previous question by my colleague, Maria. I think the question was just asked about whether or not we could provide life cycle costs. And I guess I'm throwing a question out to staff, because I think you indicated, yes, we'll try and get that to you. I just want to throw the question out. Can we get that? Is that something that has been calculated, is available? Because I don't want staff to now be in a situation where they've been committed to provide information that isn't there. Like, you're talking about life cycle costs on each of these individual purchases, these buses, et cetera, which involves some estimation of shelf life, all the mechanical repairs, et cetera. And is that done routinely? And if not, are we asking for something which is not readily available and creating a huge amount of bureaucratic work that we're not aware of? Maybe it's a TransLink question, I don't know.
We'll get Carol to jump in there.
Yeah, through it is a TransLink question, and I see TransLink's coming down to respond. We, as you know, in the fleet policy, we've put that life cycle cost information in there, and I would think if this is something that the board would like to see in that type of presentation, we will ask TransLink to maybe.
Yeah, and I just
provide
wanted to confirm that it actually was available before we made a commitment. So.
Yes, Dave Lester, TransLink Fleet Manager. Yes, that's routinely done every time a new RFP is issued for transit vehicles. When the proposals come in, basically evaluation of life cycle costs, it's part of the evaluation process.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Director Corrigan.
I just had one question I wanted to ask while we've got a chance. It arises out of the questions that were asked by the other directors, but I was just wondering if, and I may not have understood it correctly, but it seemed that staff from TransLink was saying that we were paying the interest on the portion that was not eligible. Well, if it's not eligible, how can we pay the interest on it?
TransLink's paying the interest, not we as in the gas tax.
So it's not coming from the gas tax?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Seeing no other speakers, we will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The item carries. Moving on to items not in consent. We have item G 1.1, amendment in the electoral area. Anyone like to move it? As I look to Maria. All right, it's moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Regional Planning Committee, 2.1. Someone like to move it? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, carried. Item 3.1, being brought back with a discussion from Intergov and a cover report to it. This needs to be split into two. Would someone like to move 3.1A? Moved and seconded. Director Jordan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to talk about both.
Sure.
If that's okay, and
Yep.
and reference to the report, because there's several, but at page 307. So I think this is the subsequent report following our last meeting that went to Intergov, and I appreciate that it fills in some of the background from from previous decisions around retainers and meeting fees and things, but I'm quite actually disappointed that there's some things that are, in my opinion, left out of the report, and it doesn't give as good a reflection as is my memory and is from serving on the finance committee in those days and looking up some of the details in the last few days. And I refer you to page 308, where it talks about the discussion about the difference between select committees and standing committees, and clarifies the definition, and that's those points laid out in the report are accurate, yes, but what's not described and discussed is that back in that day, one of the reasons that the board chair and vice chair were not to be remunerated for standing committee meetings was because it was a conflict. Because the board chair appoints people to the standing committees, so if they appoint themselves to a committee, then that puts them in a conflict situation. And that's what I recall as the discussion around the finance table of the day. So again, the report doesn't reflect that part of the discussion. On page 309, it talks about the history of the remuneration reviews over time, and it does point out that back in the early 2000s, there was a committee that reviewed all the remuneration and recommended actually that there be a retainer for the board chair, vice chair, and the directors, plus a meeting fee, right? But this report does not tell us that the retainer for annual retainer for the board chair was set at 69%. It just says a percentage, right? That number was 69% back in 2003. And then in 2007, it was reviewed again, and it was increased to 75% of the regional mean mayor's salary. And in the wisdom of the board, we decided that directors would not get a retainer, that we would only get meeting fees, but that the board chair would have a larger annual retainer but no meeting fees. And likewise for the vice chair. That was controversial. You can look up the minutes of the February 2007 meeting where that was decided on. There was a number of people who voted in the negative on that, but again, that went through. So again, although the report is accurate in what it says, there are some things that are left out. Then you come to page 310, which gives some comparisons of other regional districts and talks about, for example, the CRD. The CRD indeed went to a total different system last year. They went to a system where there was a retainer for directors, a retainer for the chair. This report in front of us leaves out the numbers. The chair gets $25,000, and all the directors and the chair get $17,000. So the total package for the chair is, I think, $42,000, right? So, and they get no meeting fees. So I guess, what I'm getting at is that here we are looking at one piece of the puzzle, whether or not the chair and vice chair get a meeting fee allowance. And instead of looking at the whole package and seeing whether or not we want to review the whole thing, you're only looking at one piece of it. And to me, that's wrong-headed. If we're going to look at saying we should have a retainer fee and meeting fees, then we should also look at retainer and meeting fees for the rest of the board. So I sit on several boards. I've sit on tons of governance committees. I'm a close colleague of the person who wrote the governance rules for all the credit unions in the province. I deal with this stuff all the time. One of the precepts of retainers and meeting fees is that usually the chair would have a larger annual retainer and no meeting fees, or a lower retainer and meeting fees. But we have, I would use the term bastardization. Is that is that Shakespearean of it when we look at our system here, and it just doesn't make sense to me, and it does not seem to be a fair way to do things. And forgive me for doing this, but I need to compliment TransLink, because TransLink used to have the system where the chair of the board got $100,000 and no meeting fees. Now, they've changed that. They changed it in that the chair of the board now gets a retainer, but a much reduced retainer and meeting fees. So you have to look at the things together. You can't just add on this and add on that and look at the whole concept behind it. So so now the chair of the board of TransLink gets a $63,000 retainer and meeting fees. But to just keep sort of adding on, and adding on, to me is not a proper way to look at this. When you're looking at it, you should look at the whole thing. And the other piece of it, which is frustrating to me, is, and looking at what happened at the CRD, when we decide that the directors around this table only will receive meeting fees and not an annual retainer, then when meetings are canceled, when the board schedule is changed, then that significantly impacts the amount of money received because there's no annual retainer. So to me, the whole package should be looked at again, and not just this one piece. And to say you're going to limit to a certain number of meetings that the chair and vice chair will be paid for, to me, that's just silly. It's a principle that you be paid for meeting fees or you don't, all or none. And to put some kind of a numerical limit on it with no justification that I can understand where that number came from, I can't support that.
All right, thank you for your comments. Director Brody.
I'm trying to reflect on those comments that were just made to see whether there's anything with the greatest of respect to Director Jordan with which I agree. I think the history can be helpful, but not definitive. We can go back to what we looked at years ago. I certainly have a less recollection than Director Jordan does of the details. And I thought I would never live long enough to hear anybody say anything nice about the TransLink remuneration package, but there it is. I guess I really must be getting old. But the way I look at it is simply this. We need to structure a fair package. It's the right thing to do. And I have to ask to depersonalize this analysis. I think that this chair and this vice chair must spend an inordinate amount of time in their duties. There doesn't seem to be any base that they ever leave uncovered. Yet, in spite of that, they are on some committees and are active contributing members to those committees. It's not just a matter of dropping in to see how a committee is going on. It's actually substantively contributing to those committees, chairing them, vice chairing them, being on the committees, doing all the committee work. I do agree that I can see this issue of the conflict. I do think that the 18 meetings per year addresses that issue. I think that it behooves us to be fair to ourselves and to the vice chair and the chair. I chaired the finance committee when we did a go-around on all of this. I think you were on it, and some of the rest of us. I don't know at that time, this is 6-7 years ago, I don't think that we looked at the chair and the vice chair. We just left that alone and assumed it was okay. So I think this is a fair thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do. And to the extent that that the chair and the vice chair are on the committees and they're active members of that committee, I think that we should be supporting them and giving them meeting fees.
Thank you for your comments. Director Jordan, or Jackson, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. For those that obviously weren't here, I sat in that big chair for 6 years. And, I've looked at this very carefully because we went through this when I was chair. And I must say that at the time the increase took place for the board chair and the vice chair, I thought it was very generous indeed. Because I guess I maybe have a different philosophy than some. I'm here to serve. I'm not here for the money. So I go to lots of meetings and I don't get paid. I don't expect to get paid. That's what I do. I look after people and the business that is government business. I think the package that is before us is a very fair package. And when these particular board chair and vice chair, with all due respect to those that are in those chairs, they can or don't have to go to all of the committee meetings. But they definitely have an edge on an ability to speak with the committee. They come and sit at a lot of the committee meetings, speak maybe, maybe not, come, maybe not. But their opportunity should be either prior to in instigating these reports or when those reports come forward through staff and they go through these offices before they come to this table. So there's ample time for the chair and the board vice chair to have input. I believe that any committee other than, say, the mayor's committee, because you are a mayor, you should be sitting on that committee, those positions should be taken up by either directors or other councillors so that we can have a broader view on some of the committees rather than being taken up by the chair and the vice chair. But I really don't see any reason for any increase. We are remunerated very well, I believe, and it's almost an embarrassment to me sometimes when people ask us how much money we get at this table. This is really an adjunct to my position as mayor, and I represent my community as mayor at this table. And I wonder what kind of attendance we'd get if no one was paid. Interesting thought, isn't it? So I am not in favor of this going ahead, with all due respect. I as Director Jordan looked at Capital Regional District. Fraser Valley Regional Chair, they've got like 450,000 people out there now. The chair gets $26,000 a year. Here, what is it, 75,000? That's too much, really. I think it's too much. And I think that we have to be here for the right reason. And the right reason is that we want to serve our communities, not serve ourselves. So, I just really feel, having sat in the chair and know the input that you can actually have without sitting on a committee and getting paid for it, if you would, that this really is not quite right. The lift in the stipend for the chair back in 2007 or whatever it was, that was to cover any extra meetings that I attended without having a vote, but having a say if I felt like it. And those extra meetings, if you would, were covered, and the board wanted to do that for the chair's position. So that was already done. That lift is already incorporated in the $75,000, and likewise with the chairs, the vice chair's stipend. So I agree wholeheartedly with Director Jordan, and for those that haven't been here, I really think that you should be thinking about this very, very long, because I go to my community and talk to the people in the street. We're already fairly well paid as representatives on our councils, in my opinion. And this is an add-on. And then if you're on other committees, that's another add-on. And I mean, is that really why we're here. I don't believe so. Maybe some of you differ with that. Nonetheless, I will be voting in opposition to both A and B. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I see no other speakers, so we'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? You guys want them recorded, I assume? Can you see them? Did I read them all out? Okay, from Walton to Dollywall, and everybody in between, Drew and Smith. All right, the motion passes. 3.1B, moved and seconded. Yeah, I counted you guys. I was just moving them. Any other further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? I'm going to assume the same group is opposed. The item passes. Resolution to close, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.